Paul Gross is a Canadian movie star who has written, directed, and starred in two stunning movies about Canada's military history, Passchendaele for World War I and Hyena Road on our 13-year mission of Canada's role in Afghanistan. Paul, thank you very much for being with Context.
No, it was my pleasure.
So this is obviously Remembrance Day. Having Hyena Road air for free in the afternoon is definitely a message movie. Why was this such an important movie to do for you?
Well, it started really with I guess the origins of it would be with Passchendaele, because there were a lot of Canadian forces, soldiers in Passchendaele playing soldiers, and I got to know an awful lot of people in the forces, and then was invited to go to Afghanistan to visit the troops, and finally went. I was unable to go for a number of years, but I was finally able to go in 2010, and it was completely disorienting, to say the least.
It was a goodwill trip.
It was, yeah, to go and wander around and say hello to troops. But it was really unlike anything I think I was prepared to expect, and that I mean by largely the media and the government. It just was vastly more complex and complicated and lethal and confusing. And I thought, well, I should at least go back and photograph it. So I went back about a few months later with a camera team. We spent about 2 weeks out at a forward operating base just shooting stuff. I didn't have a story at the time. But it was in that trip and talking with soldiers that I started to think, yeah, there is a story to be told here. And I suppose the real reason for wanting to do it is that I think I was as ignorant as most Canadians, or most Canadians were about as ignorant as I was to what it was we were actually doing there. And more importantly, what it was we were asking our fellow citizens to do. As when we say to our friends and neighbors and relatives, would you please go over here and fight on our behalf, we ought to at least understand what it is we're asking them to do.
You help us make memories of what was important then. And in both of your movies, never a wasted scene on our military. In Hyena Road and also in Passchendaele, the cross of Jesus comes out clearly in some very poignant scenes. Why was that included?
Well, in Passchendaele, there was a very persistent rumor, and I think it was kind of one of those apocryphal stories, I suppose, that the Germans had crucified a Canadian soldier against a barn door. And this was supposed to have happened in 1915 in a retreat in the same area where Passchendaele was fought, at the Ypres salient. I actually don't think that probably happened. I think the Germans were no more diabolical than we were, but I think it was something looked like that. And most of the Canadian troops were religious by nature, largely Protestant, and they were in an extremely Catholic country in Belgium. And the imagery of the physical imagery of Christ on the cross was present everywhere. It still is today. You see it on lampposts and things, or the little shrines. And I think that they were imbued with all of that, and also with the need to have a moral force behind what they were doing. So I think that there was an undercurrent. It doesn't really seem like that when you look at just on the face of it, of the First World War, but I think there was an undercurrent of religious thought throughout it. And I think in part the catastrophe of that war, the apocalyptic nature of it, accounted for the subsequent real decline in religious fervor and attendance in the Western world. I think it took a long time for it to return, because it was as T.S. Eliot wrote later, it was the wasteland. And I felt that and sort of in a more immediate, personal, dramatic way, that it is the greatest symbol, or the most important symbol of sacrifice, self-sacrifice that we have collectively. And it seemed to make sense somehow, not in a way that I could rationally explain, but it made sense to be the centerpiece of the film.
Paul Gross, thank you for reminding us on Remembrance Day about our military. Thank you.
Thank you.